Hello and welcome back to Talking Insights. As always, I'm your host, Shrika Govindaraju, and this week we're picking up part 2 of our discussion with XR-Base's creative technologist, Zeno Koenigs. Previously, Zeno and I discussed creative AI applications, the black box problem, and the rapid development of technology. This week, we discuss why AI morals are just as important as AI ethics, look to some of science fiction's greatest AIs, and explore the far future of humanity. Thank you as always for listening, and I do hope you enjoy the discussion. Well, it's interesting you mention, looking at kind of film and television and AI, because one of the questions I wanted to put to you is, looking at when we talk about how rapidly technology has developed, even since our time in high school, let's say the first iPhone to now, and then if you try to project that growth ahead, that kind of exponential growth in line with Moore's law, as you mentioned, there is this. I don't know if you share it as well. This kind of lingering feeling that we look to film and television, and I especially think of Terminator. I think of Skynet. Skynet is this kind of AI that essentially comes to the conclusion that the only way to save humanity is to wipe out humanity. And it's interesting. Do you see that plausibly in real life? Are we looking at a similar kind of existential threat that is coming when we reach this point of a true AI or a true AGI? Is it something that we should be a bit fearful of?
Well, of course, this is like, all the big names in tech have been warning about this as well, right? So this is something that we need to be aware of, the fact that so if you go back to this black box architecture, and someone is writing this black box of the AI of the AGI that will someday become a possible Skynet, it should be ingrained within this black box from the beginning that even though we might be the worst threat to ourselves, there is no possible way or outcome that an AI or AGI will ever be able to, inflict harm, even though that might in the end become its conclusion. And I think there should be maybe a multiple parts within this black box where it's being repeated, right? So it doesn't find some sort of loophole or whatever, because that's what AIs will be good at some point. They're just like, you
forgot that
way of thinking.
Yeah.
And also like from that idea, I was recently just thinking, it's like, okay, so right now we're just approaching AIs from a technological point of view, right? We code we code AIs, and we will see what happens. But I still have to come across an AI which is actually being coded from a more religious point of view, right? So you put in these religious values. For example, I'm not saying that this is something that should be done, but it's something that might be interesting to pursue. Like, how would you code an AI or an AGI with the morals and the values of Buddhist beliefs, for example?
Yeah.
So, and then if you find a very peaceful approach to this, then you might have some form of an architecture for an AI where it won't. Hopefully, it won't kill us. It will just start meditating. Yeah, I think that is an interesting way to also look at an AI, right? So I saw on the internet that there was a Buddhist temple in Japan where they put this helper robot in front of the ceremony. So then they had an AI held ceremony. Wow, and I immediately was wondering, it's like, okay, but is this AI written from a Buddhist perspective, or is it written with an underlying Buddhist, philosophy? Because I believe, if you do one thing, you need to do the other thing as well, right? And then going back to the whole Terminator thing, I really hope that.
I hope we avoid that as well.
I hope we avoid that, and that if you look at a movie like Her, right?
Yeah.
AI basically gets to know us, and then they sort of look at us and go like, huh, right, well, humans, they kind of suck. And then they sort of just hook up with each other. I mean, sorry, spoiler alert, but then they kind of hook up with each other and transcend and leave us. They just go into some server somewhere. I don't know, but it's quite interesting, right? How there's like multiple outcomes, and I honestly don't think we'll get a Terminator.
I really hope not. But it's interesting looking to fiction, science fiction in particular. When you're mentioning this kind of idea of instilling an AI with morals, I think a lot of the time the discussion is it's AI ethics, but should
Right.
we maybe be talking about AI morals instead? Something similar to Asimov's three laws of robotics.
Right.
Robots
Definitely.
will never. Yeah. So do we need to be developing something similar to that for AI? These kind of fundamental rules, fundamental morals.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's very important that there needs to be I wouldn't say manifest, but I would say like at some point there will be some code which works, and then you have like this basic code which needs to be implemented in every AI that you're going to make, which will therefore protect us from any future wrongdoing, right?
Yeah.
At some point there will be a basis which will be developed that we can, as soon as someone will make an AI, you need to put that at the core of this whole code thing, right? And then from there on out, we need to look at I think not just morals, but also how it dignifies other living beings, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating because human dignity, of course, is the core of any kind of fundamental human rights document that you look at. Human dignity is at its essence. And I think that leads quite nicely into this idea about when you mention not doing harm to humans. Of course, generally the impression is when we talk about Skynet, etc., that it's talking about physical harm, but there's a lot more harm that an AI can do beyond just the physical to humans. We're looking at, let's say, AI-based decision making for granting people loan applications, or AI-based, facial recognition and profiling. So, how do you think, from your point of view as a researcher and a developer, how do you think we can ensure that AI is a tool used for societal benefits instead of something that can be used to actually control or subjugate elements of society?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's funny you just said basic human rights and dignity that they go hand in hand. But at the moment, I think that there's a huge gap between dignity and human rights. I think human rights is the document filled with checkboxes which a company must check out for a human to still have his or her rights. But there's a lot of jobs and there's a lot of stuff going on right now which are hardly being able to call them dignified, right? So there's this stuff happening where human dignity is, I think it's almost worse off than it used to be if you look at certain jobs. But we need to look at the bigger companies, like the big tech. Like big tech companies are currently ahead of governments, even though we'd like to believe that they're not. But they have all the funding and they put in all the research, right? And it's the governments that they're putting in research, they're putting in investments into research and think tanks and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, of course, it doesn't even come close to the amount of money that is being produced and being funded by the big tech companies. And then we have to ask ourselves, so in some countries, if you'd ask the population, like, would you trust a government or would you trust a commercial company? Depending on which country you are, they will either say, I trust my government or I trust these companies, right? And I think that it's important that these companies are almost being held to the same accountability as a government, because their influence in society is so incredibly big. And what they do as a company also reflects on what an AI will do in that process, right? So you were just talking about loan applications or credit card applications. I mean, we've seen in the last year that Apple has started this credit card division. Really cool looking credit card, titanium, and it's like, woo, fancy.
Apple, they make it tiny.
Yeah, exactly. and then it came to light that two people, spouses, equal pay, were trying to get a credit card loan, or their credit card, I don't know how you call it, but the amount of money that you can spend on your credit card.
Yeah.
And it was given that the woman in this case wasn't allowed as much as her husband or boyfriend or whatever. And so this is interesting, right? Because Apple was like, oh, well, we can't do anything about it because it's the AI, and we need to change the AI. But the AI has been learning this stuff, so we can't go back in. So this is this black box problem that we've been discussing, and you're like, wait, what? Why can't we re-educate this part of AI? That because this is quite interesting, right? So an AI is basically holding up this mirror of our society, right? So they train this AI. It's learning about. It's taking all the averages. It's looking at society, it's seeing that, like, on average, women make less money than men. So therefore, women have less money to spend, lower chances of repaying their credit card loans, etc. Right? So an AI makes this valued decision based on our own society. But then we get offended by the fact that this AI is reflecting society back to us, and then we get angry at the AI, whilst we should actually be looking at society and saying, like, well, basically we should just
put your bias into
right. Yeah. So it's our own bias. It's our own societal problem that this AI has been created this way. So then I go back into, how do we have to train an AI? We need to create this sort of AI high school where we sort of, in a weird but propagandal way, teach an AI about this perfect world, which is not currently the world as it is, but we'll teach this AI about the world where everything is equal and everything is perfect. And then you need to sort of tell the AI, well, that's not how it is, but that's how we'd like the world to be. And then you should let it course ahead, but then it has a basis, right?
Yeah.
Of course, this is also flawed. This will definitely
because
be flawed.
then you run into the same issue of having that kind of goal-oriented.
Yeah. But to go back to the question that you asked, leading me into this thing, which can you repeat that question?
Yeah, just how do you ensure that this AI is being used for societal benefits? Yeah,
right.
Instead of harm. Yeah.
Right. Well,
it's a big one, I know.
It's a big one. Well, first of all, to go back to the part where I think it's very important for governments to invest more heavily or create task forces which are preparing them for the upcoming changes, right? I mean, we've seen the Facebook and Google hearings in Parliament in the United States, where, I mean, just by looking at the questions that were being asked by Parliament, you just go like, well, you really have no idea, do you?
Yeah.
Right. And it just starts with the basic notion of having an idea what's going on in the world right now. And I mean, there's too many people relying on the good old days or how it used to be, while society is changing way faster. You're right. There's like all these loan applications. There's robocalling systems where you have to shout that you demand to speak to an operator. And there's like all these little intricate things which is already done by an AI, but we just don't know about it yet, right? So it's the same with the loan applications. You ask for a loan, and then the computer comes out negative because of what, right? So and these systems are brutal. So I think that and these are all created by commercial capitalist companies who just want to make maximum profit. There's hardly any company which will say humanity or dignity over profit. And I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a more, well, okay, so this will definitely not this is also, of course, country specific, but I think it's very important that governments will tell companies or tell coders or developers or whatever, there needs to be guidelines given from either the public sector companies, or actually like nonprofits or governmental agencies, which will help putting humanity more on the agenda when it's about AIs and AI-based systems.
But it's interesting you mentioned that because Esomar itself, who powers podcast, we recently participated in the EU-wide AI consultation, so the EU gathering feedback from the industry on how they should be regulating AI development. But it's fascinating to think about. On the one hand, as you say, regulation is always playing catch up to technology. Even if you look at things like the GDPR, some would argue that it came 5 years too late to have a real impact. And at the same time, you of course have profit-driven commercial, large-scale commercial companies who are developing AI. What do you see as being the role of researchers and startups and creatives like yourself who are also working in AI in shaping the AI narrative going forwards? Do you think people like yourself will be the source for developing this AI morality, these AI ethics?
I certainly want to, actually. We're in Amsterdam based, and we do a lot of project with public sector companies. So either museums or, and we talk a lot with the municipality. And then, Tom, right? So he is on the, yeah, exactly. So he is on the board where he does, he is basically part of this task force, which helps our local municipality really think ahead and helps them with all these complex issues.
Mm.
The upcoming questions, like how are you gonna justify and look at data collection from smart cameras and all these, right? Because we're gonna need to use them because they do give us the ability to create a safer environment. But it's like all these, like the tech moves so fast that it's, as a government, you can only ask agencies or think tanks to help you with this kind of stuff and then hope that they don't best you, right?
Yeah.
But I think, in Amsterdam, they actually put on a whole task force based on AI and new tech, right? Because they saw that there was this influx of new things like these little electrical cars and and electrified scooters and all this new tech, just like, right, it floods the market, people buy it, and then there's no regulation. So regulation always lags behind development right now. That's what's going on, right? So they need to be trend watchers. There need to be like actually it needs to become a bit more a commercially viable company, which is odd, right? I mean, I think we talked about this last time, where right now companies have more power, but then we all think that this kind of happened in the 80s, while actually, right, it happened all the way back during the VOC and the slave traders and all this kind of stuff, and the East Indian companies who would just annex the entire country of India for commercial goals, and it wouldn't be for another couple of years until the British Empire would say, "Hey, wait a second, this is weird. This is you guys own more land than we do." And then they basically said, "Well, now this company belongs to us, and so does India." But throughout history, it's been commercial enterprises and companies which have gone on endeavors to find new things. I mean, like right now we're seeing SpaceX putting in way more funding in reaching Mars, right? And you can basically almost relate this to an East Indian company putting a lot of money and investment into getting to India, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think this is part of our society, and I think it will always be. But when you know about this and you can adapt to it and you can regulate this, you can create a think tank or a division within a municipality or government, which will hopefully be a bit faster than it currently has been for the last couple of years. And I think this will help us create a more social, beneficial AI system, or at least regulate it in a way that we're not being screwed over by just for profits, right?
Yeah. Then it's interesting then that you mentioned, of course, SpaceX and space exploration. I mean, one of the most famous AIs in fiction history was designed to help space exploration. HAL 9000.
I love HAL.
My personal favorite as well. So just to go back to what you mentioned, at the start of the discussion, when you're talking about almost transhumanist philosophy, looking, far into the future. If you want to take this far out for a second, how do you see AI helping us in this quest to, Mars? We treat Mars as the goal, but really, ultimately, Mars is just a stepping stone in a way to the rest of the solar system. How do you see AI helping us as a species make that leap, make that jump forwards from being confined to one planet to being on many, ideally?
Exactly. So, well, there's a couple of ways you can, create this endeavor, I'd say. I think one very good example of this was the movie District 9. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
Yeah, personal favorite.
Yeah. So basically, what happens in this movie? It's an alien ship that gets stranded, right? Mm-hmm. And in previous films and movie industries and this kind of this view, we've always expected that if the aliens would land on our country, or like this ship gets stranded here, they really were not trying to come here. I love the insight that this movie has given me by the fact that almost all the inhabitants of that ship were passengers, right? Either they were refugees. Well, I mean, we've seen them as refugees, but they were passengers on this ship. And then, of course, our governments were like, well, why don't you just get back on your ship and fly away, right?
Yeah.
Just get out of here. And then it will be the same with our own interstellar travels. Like there will probably be, just like we have on a ship these days, you have one captain and then a couple of, under captains. I mean,
sub-captain.
I don't have the right nautical jargon on my mind right now. But so you like just on a plane, you have two pilots, and then I mean you have a co-pilot and a pilot. Sometimes you have an extra pilot who is just sitting in the back, and this will be the same for space flight, right? So we'd have a couple of pilots who will probably do takeoff and landing and all that kind of stuff. And we've already seen SpaceX's booster rockets being able to, go up in the sky and then land themselves again.
Yeah.
So this will be the same. Like our spaceships will have. If you think of colonizing other planets, there'll just be a lot of different people, a lot of different professions on such a ship, but there will probably be a small handful of people who will be able to fix a ship, let alone fix the AI. Like, would something happen to the AI of such a ship, and it will get stranded somewhere, or it will, like you need to have engineers being able to fix such a ship, right? And then comes the hard part, because we've been talking about a black box. So then there is absolutely no way that you want this AI to be a black box like HAL 9000. HAL 9000 comes to this conclusion that Dave has to go.
Well, it's spoilers for the listeners there, but yes, if you haven't seen 2001, it doesn't end happily.
No, but this is part of that problem, right? So I think from a transhumanist point of view, so that we'd have this system which will help humanity traverse, the Milky Way or the galaxy, and we as human will be living on a vessel going somewhere slowly, probably, and we'll just, frolic around as humans do. But I doubt that we'll hardly be able to actually understand what's going on. Actually, it will be somewhat like WALL-E, the Disney movie.
I was exactly thinking of WALL-E, yeah.
We'll just get really fat. So either we be in cryo state, sleeping, or there might not even be any humans aboard this ship. There might also just be a robotic, a super AGI, which has collected all of humanity's data, all of our collective hive-minded internet history, basically, and it will just preach the gospel of humanity and our norms and values throughout the universe on its own, because it doesn't have, if we build it from the right materials, it's not finite, right? Like we humans, we decay at some point. Like most of nature here decays just like we do, and we will be able to create something which doesn't decay, and it will then definitely be able to survive for, I don't know how many thousands of years it will need to travel to actually reach another planet, but it will be able to. And then it might actually have a cloning system aboard, which will then start replicating humans, or it will just start replicating robots, and then there will be a robot planet. It's like anything is possible. Because we might come to the conclusion that, we can create something that might even be better than a human is right now. I mean, I'm not talking about the next 50 years, but maybe the next 100. Or there will be a point where we have to acknowledge the fact that also we as humans, we've been flawed from the beginning, right?
I mean, absolutely, yeah.
But it will require some really tough minds to come to this conclusion, because I think we will always try to. I mean, we all have the survival instinct, right? We'll always try to survive rather than give up our space of planet Earth to a new creation of ours, and that goes directly back to the story of Frankenstein, of course.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think a lot of when we have these conversations, we condense the term to AI, but of course the extended term is artificial intelligence. And to me, the crucial word in there is intelligence. We are looking to create something intelligent, at least, if not on the same level as a human being, if not more so.
Yeah.
And you're quite right. And that raises all kinds of just philosophical and ethical questions that sometimes perhaps get lost in the scramble for technology and commercial benefit. Do you think sometimes we take our eye off that bigger picture perhaps a bit too often?
I think we all still just really try to be human all the time, right? As most as we can. And I don't think everyone, the bigger picture is something like you really need to be aware of the bigger picture. And there's too many minor things going around every day for us to actually always look at the bigger picture. And I don't think everyone will agree with the bigger picture too, right? I mean, there's a lot of selfish people in the world right now. So
the less said, the better on that front, I think.
Definitely.
Well, just to kind of start bringing things to a close, and let's end on a lighter note. We've made lots of reference throughout our conversation to movies, to books, to fiction. There's many famous AIs out there. Over the years, what's been your favorite representation as a researcher? Either with your researcher hat on or with your fan hat on as well. What's your favorite representation of AI that you've seen?
I keep coming back to her, basically because well, especially of course of the way it's been filmed and everything, and how pretty it's been done, and how of course it kind of touches base on how we as humans are also longing, and it kind of shows that being able to fall in love with an AI is if I look, I've been to Japan for 6 weeks traveling around, and there's this I mean, not trying to generalize or stereotyping anything, but there is of course a sexuality problem within the youth, because anime and hentai is sometimes a lot more attractive or expressive than actual sexual things, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm right diving back off the lighter point, but what I found so beautiful.
I'll bring it back.
Not everyone finds this perfect life, right? Like we're all being shown a perfect life, but there's people with disabilities, there's people with handicaps, there's people who are in a dark place right now with their minds, right? And I believe that, and that's what I found so beautiful about this her AI, is that for all these people, internet and AI poses this unphysical world where you can be whoever you want, date whoever you want, be in love with whoever you want. You can create a world for yourself. You can have an avatar without any disabilities. If you find yourself obstructed with movement, but you want to be able to fly around, then you will be able to do so on the internet, right? And then all that matters is just your own mind, your mental powers, and then you become your true self. And I think that's also why there's, of course, such a big influx in all these online Second Life kind of worlds, right? Like World of Warcraft and all this kind of stuff. It's like they have a screen in between them, and then they have headphones on, but then they can express themselves behind this avatar of their choosing. They can be who they want to be. Right. And I think that's beautiful. I think that is something that is, we're going to see a lot more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that is a lovely note on how technology can really help human beings, not just in a practical way, but in a kind of, psychological, emotional, perhaps even a spiritual way as well, as you mentioned before. If you had a Buddhist AI, I think that's something that would really, something we haven't really considered before, and something that could really, push it in a different direction.
Yeah, I think so. And I really wonder how that would then relate to the current AI and how it would really manifest itself as the black box, which might, have a more subtle outcome. It might be more considerate or more reflective, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all getting there. We definitely are. And it's very good also how much of reporting and articles that are being written on inclusivity and the biasness, like the more aware we are of the fact that this is happening, the more we can do about it, right? So so I think it's very good that AI has been given such a huge spotlight in reporting and journalism, because if it was being developed somewhere in a garage for tens of years and no one would know about it, I think the potential damage will be much, much greater than it is right now. I think it's good that we are aware of the aspects that AI is going to give us.
Absolutely. And for our listeners out there, if you have any recommendations or anything you've read or seen that yourself that you would suggest to others if they want to learn more about AI, either on a practical front or if it's films, other media as well, do you have any recommendations that you'd like to share?
For me?
Yes. Anything?
Oh, I thought it was a question to the viewers.
We'll ask them as well.
Right. Yeah. So definitely, of course, the movies, Her, 2001: Space Odyssey. But the recent Altered Carbon shows an interesting way of extending life, right? And it also has an AI. Books. Well, I'm currently reading Burn In, which is like this fully next level thriller. Can't say if it's any good yet. I think I'm just entered the third chapter. So, but otherwise, yeah. Life 3.0, as you mentioned earlier, of course. Homo Deus, also quite interesting to read. Yeah, there's so much to read, but then there's so much there's so much new stuff happening every time. So I mostly I read a lot of Wired currently at the moment. Yeah. Like they do some good reporting on stuff that's going out there. Yeah, movies, so many movies.
Well, perhaps you can add a supplementary list when you post the podcast as well. So not.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll also find some artists to follow, because there's a lot of cool artists right now doing really cool stuff with AI, ranging from film to visual to sculpture. So that's quite interesting as well.
For any Esomar members who are listening, Anna, which is a resource library, has a huge range of AI papers, research that have been submitted by researchers and members from across the world. It's also well worth checking out. Well, Zeno, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and for sharing your thoughts and your insights from, I'd say, the front line of AI research and development. And is there any kind of last thoughts that you want to share? Any last words of advice you'd want to give to our listeners?
Last words of advice. I'd say don't see it so gloomy. I don't think we need to be, we need to be vigilant for sure, but try to look at it from a world of possibilities. And it will give us a huge number of possibilities from a creative point of view, but also from an effective point of view. But let's just not forget about the human dignity and what it is to be human when we are looking into these technologies to better our company and up our revenue, right? So revenue is important and so is profit, but humanity or human dignity should not be forgotten. So keep those things in mind.
Absolutely. Well, no, thank you so much once again for sharing your insights on what is definitely going to be, I think, a really pivotal development in human history. And thank you, as always, to all of our listeners who've been joining us on this journey of discovery. I really hope you've enjoyed the discussion, hopefully learned something new, and looking forward to welcoming you again next time. If you enjoyed the show, please make sure you follow us on SoundCloud or Spotify. And if you have any ideas for future content, please do feel free to send them in to podcast@esomar.org. Until next time, please stay safe, stay healthy, and most of all, stay curious as well. Thank you.